Hello, everyone, and welcome to Books on Tap Live, PW's weekly, not weekly, well, it is weekly, video conferencing and author interview show. I'm Calvin Reed, Senior News Editor, Publishers Weekly, editor of PW Comics World, and editor of the Fanatic, PW's twice-a-month comics and pop culture newsletter. This week on Books on Tap Live, we're going to be talking to Tyler and Wendy Chen, authors of the new graphic novel American Terrorist, but also co-publishers of A Wave Blue World, co-publishers and co-founders of A Wave Blue World, which is sponsoring this event. Hey, Wendy. Hey, Tyler. How you doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing just fine. Look, I can't wait to talk to you a little bit more about this book. Let me give a couple of announcements here. We're going to be giving away signed copies of the book along with a limited number of sketchbooks filled with Tyler's original art. Enter to win by going to publishersweekly.com/Chintanner. We've also dropped the link, and it's probably scrolling under me right now as I ramble on. We've dropped a link in the comments section on Facebook and on YouTube. And remember, during the event, audience members can ask questions by writing them in the comments section on Facebook and on YouTube, and we'll try to answer as many of those as possible. And if you'd like to receive notifications of future events, sign up at publishersweekly.com/BooksOnTapLive. All right. Okay. We're going to be talking to, as I quickly get in my short introduction here, Tyler Chintanner, his wife, Wendy Chintanner. They are co-publishers, co-founders of A Wave Blue World. Individually, very quickly, let's see. Tyler attended the Kubert School from 2003 to 2006, co-founded A Wave Blue World along with Wendy at that time, around 2005. He is a published author, including a number of graphic novels published through A Wave Blue World, as well as editing, writing, and overseeing anthologies. Wendy is a co-publisher and co-executive director of A Wave Blue World, but she is also a poet and author. And among her collections are Turn, published in 2014. Anyone Will Tell You, published in 2019. She is a poetry editor as well at The Nervous Breakdown, as well as a trained sociologist. So we're going to have them talk a little bit more about themselves and their book. But first, just very quickly, American Terrorist, really striking work, a real thoughtful exploration of not just the human relations, but really the social climate around them. It catalogs a variety of issues touching on social justice, the environment, government surveillance, mental health care, all of this delivered through a wild and thrilling adventure story full of sudden turns and great lively characters. So that's what I think about your book. So, tell you what, as I understand it, this is a sort of a revised edition. I don't know if that's accurate or not. Can you give me a little bit background on the book here, and then I want your book to tell us maybe a little bit more about yourselves. But give us a readout on the book.
Sure, yeah. So this is considered the 10th anniversary edition. It was independently published. Well, I guess this is independently since it's A Wave of the World, but without distribution. It was published in 2010. And that was in black and white, so it was before the color was done. And so this year, we felt, oddly, as it was just as appropriate as it was in 2010, as these issues have just come more to the forefront. So we put out a new edition. This one's in color, and we did give it a quick edit over it just to sort of update things a little, but we didn't change it. It's essentially just the same story. It was more of just sort of a cleaning up over the last 10 years. And yeah, this is the new edition that's got national book distribution for the first time through our distributors, Diamond. And we're really excited to have it out and reach a new audience who didn't see the original black and white edition that came out 10 years ago.
We purposely didn't write it at the time to tip our hat at any particular administration. So it's still absolutely relevant in that sense. And the revision that we did was, just partly to do with our writing skills having increased over the last 10 years. And, I took out a bunch of Tyler's dad jokes, although he fought pretty hard to keep them in.
She tried to take them all out. I did manage to bargain some. They're still in there. So fans of dad jokes would go.
I'm sure the negotiations were tough.
Yeah.
We neglected to mention the artist, because I mean that's a real key part of this book. The art is really terrific, really rich and richly colored, but very detailed, dynamic when it needs to be, thoughtful and calming and solemn when it needs to be. So tell us a little bit about Andy McDonald.
Yeah, Andy McDonald, who did both the cover, which you saw earlier, and the interior black and white line work. He did a great job. I didn't know Andy at the time when I was just coming out of the Kubert School. I had read NYC Mech, it was an Image title, and I just was flipping through it and be like, that's what I want for American Terror. So I just called him, told him about the project, and he was like, yeah, count me in. I was like, okay, that was fun. It was a breeze working with Andy, just sending him a script and coming up with these pages, just being delivered to us. And it was really, he obviously had his side of the storytelling added to it, so certainly want to give him a nod to that. Just interpreting our script and making these beautiful visuals, and then helped out in this new edition colorists Matt Wilson and Michael Wiggum. This page is a Michael Wiggum page. They both did a great job, jammed a little bit together on it because of their schedules. Did a terrific job. Color edition is wonderful. Black and white looked great, but color enhanced it. So terrific guys. Happy to have them as part of the project.
Some collaborations are hard, but this one was really easy. Everyone seemed to really understand what we were doing and believed in the project.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, the color is incredibly rich, works really well, and really carries the story forward. But tell us a little bit. I mean, it's got a complex plot because you've got so many characters here, but it really does. I mean, a lot of it revolves around really the accidental involvement of a teacher, and
right.
among many personalities that show up in the book. So tell us, give us just a quick overview of the plot of the book.
Yeah, so the four main characters, there was an ensemble cast, all had their own reasons to get mixed up in this. They view themselves as activists or people working in fields that were, supposedly like helping out the community. We have a teacher, investigative journalist, civil rights lawyer, and a scientist, an EPA scientist. But just in terms of them trying to do their job, they step out of line and end up on the wrong side of the law. Now, there's a bit of a mishap, as you alluded to, centered around Hannah and her medical conditions and trying to get the right medication for that. That's a little bit where the comic booky, would this really happen? I don't know, maybe. It's a crazy world out there. But she's misinterpreted as having a bomb instead of just being really upset. And that sets everything going, catastrophe one after the other, until they end up on the run, their story on the news and being labeled as terrorists. Sort of sensationalized in the news media, and you use that, try to regain control through social media to tell their own story, to reach out to people all across the country and inspire a movement and an sense of activism, and what common everyday people can do to guide the direction of the country.
We have the heightened reality of a political thriller, but at the same time, we really wanted to ground these, buzzword issues in the lived experience of real people. So, first and foremost, I think we really thought very carefully about who each of these characters are and what their personal motivations are. And that helped to guide the plot.
Yeah, well, in fact, let's talk about some of these characters, because once again, you've got a great lineup of characters, and then a good part of the book is them functioning, amidst this adventure, but also in the way that they react to in their relationships with each other. So, Owen Graham, let's start with him.
Yeah, investigative journalist. That was one of the first things that came to mind, is somebody trying to do their job as an investigative journalist to really reach into the core issues and being shut down, because I think that's obviously where one of the major problems is if we're not getting the correct information put out through the news, or at least not real information, then that's a problem. And that by just him simply trying to do a good job is made the enemy. So I thought that was just a really interesting character and occupation to look at to sort of set the things running in the story.
Yeah, I think we wanted to speak through him to the anti-intellectualism that has been sweeping through American news media, the kind of dumbing down of nuance, the loss of nuance, and then the loss of discourse, basically, like actual conversation rather than debate and buzzwords and slamming each other.
And what's the Earth Liberation Commandos?
I mean, just kind of made that up. So the idea was...
you can't tell me because they'll come after you, right?
I mean, I think there's organization. Obviously, the name is similar.
Sure.
So I just tried to tweak it a little bit to come up with my own. Yeah, they're political activists, environmental, either activists or terrorists, depending on your POV. And Owen was embedded with them just to learn about them. But again, that caused, the NSA to start tracking him, and, all these agencies to flag him as being, a person of questionable association, just again, by trying to be an investigative journalist and uncover their side of the story. So they would sort of represent more of the intentionally trying to be, terrorists. They do bomb the SUV dealerships and these housing developments. So they were meant to be, a path that Owen wasn't choosing to take, right? He's like, okay, I'm not these crazy people, but yet that doesn't prevent him from being lumped in with them. So that was commentary on that.
But once again, as you introduce each character, you also kind of establish how they'll become interconnected through forces that are way larger than they are.
Yeah.
So tell us about Michael Clark.
Best friends with Owen, kind of a counterpoint. They grew up together in Ohio. Both viewed themselves as being
idealists.
Yeah, exactly. And Owen went the journalist route. He went the civil rights lawyer route. He allowed us to really put in a lot of legal language. He's trying to get what would you call it? Like
refugees.
Refugees and Middle Eastern cases. Yeah. Taken care of. So, I mean, he's out there trying to make a difference in the world through the legal system and trying to contribute and, run smack into a lot of these same problems, being shut down, his cases being shut down, not allowing proper evidence, all of sort of opening the door for him finding solutions in other means.
And through his character, we were also able to speak to and unpack the kind of racial pecking order that exists in our country too.
Let's see what else now. Now there are a number of federal agents in the book, and obviously I don't want to give away too much, but that's a key element because, as you pointed out, the NSA gets involved.
Yeah,
and our characters have to deal with that.
Yeah, well, it was interesting because the NSA guy got to be like the true bad guy, like you hated him and his character was questionable. But with the FBI agents who come in later, that gave us a chance to write more nuanced characters. I didn't want law enforcement just to be the bad guys in this situation. I mean, that's not the case. So they're dealing with things from their perspective. Obviously, they're told a certain amount of information, and they have to do a little digging themselves to find out, like, oh, maybe we're not being told the right story about these characters. So I enjoyed, working with them. I think the further we got into developing their characters, we realized by the last chapter, like, oh, these are good characters, and they got more fun to write. And I think they really added something to the story as well.
Yeah, I'm leaving off the names of them. I think it was Vince, and then there was a woman agent as well.
Vince,
right? And their relationships developed also.
Yeah, who is also a woman of color.
Yeah. Vince Clark. I named all the male characters after tight ends. I don't know if that's relevant. I was doing my fantasy football draft.
I didn't get that.
So all the names are from 10 years ago. So if you know your football from 10 years ago, they're all...
There you go. Okay.
I did change the last letter of elk though, because it was originally elf, right? It was like Earth Liberation Front. I think originally I was like, but that's elf. That's not good.
Yeah. So
well, they're sort of fantasy guardians of the planet. Yeah.
That's going in another direction.
Forest sprites. Shannon Lin, Dr. Shannon Lin. What can you tell us about her?
I mean, feel free to jump in if you want to talk about the. I mean, I'm happy to. Or other, do you want to say anything?
Sure, yeah.
Okay. Just rounding out the team, the 4 people. Obviously, environmental science and science in general has been under attack. She's trying to work in these government organizations, and her bosses are politicians who want her results to represent what his donors, are paying for, as opposed to the actual results and the actual data. So she brings this information to Owen, the investigative journalist, thinking he can do something. But of course, the world is about to erupt for him. So she ends up just, going along in the ride and being labeled as a terrorist as well. And it sort of rounds out having a scientist with them, which is useful because she helps them build bombs and stuff. So,
and she's also a sort of character who asks herself, can I change the world within the system? Or, she ultimately decides to go a different path. And she also reckons with sexism and anti-intellectualism as well in her work and in her life.
Yeah, and without giving anything away, I mean, she reaches a point as a scientist where she kind of has to make a decision, a radical decision about what she has to do. And that also, contributes through their journey, really, I guess, around the country. Yeah. And once again, that's one of the exciting parts of this book is how it connects people and parts of the country, rural. There's a sort of an echo, what would you call it? An echo village, an echo movement that's kind of established a utopian community based around technology. So, I mean, you seem to have brought a lot of issues to bear in the book. And even though it was published when it originally a while back in one form, it seems to be right on time to now.
Yeah, exactly. It's only become, I mean, for 10 years we were saying it's only becoming more relevant until we're finally like, we need to put this out again. But that Earthship Community, is their name for the...
So they're called Earthships, and the architect who invented the Earthship is Michael Reynolds. And I think it was in that first year after we became new parents. So we were really, in that kind of trippy state, and we were
hallucinating.
Yeah, as you do, not sleeping. And we watched a documentary about Michael Reynolds called The Garbage Warrior, I think it was called, and we were just blown away by it. We were blown away by his work, and we told ourselves that we would retire in an Earthship. Yeah. So that had to go in the book.
And it was responsible for turning this book from 150 pages to 220 pages, because we're like, we need to throw this in there. And now all of a sudden there was a scene which totally flowed right into it, where they show up at this community in the middle of nowhere, because it's a perfect place to hide, but it also was able to open up a whole new aspect of the book.
Was this based on a real community or a real? Because it's really well designed and a really rich part of the whole story.
Yeah, there's an Earthship Community. The original one, I think, is in New Mexico.
Yeah. And we either just sent the documentary to Andy or sent him pictures from it, but we're like this.
Oh, yeah, I think we sent him the DVD.
Yeah.
Back then, you watched movies on DVD.
Right. Yeah, we're like, watch this. So.
So as the band of unlikely comrades basically ricochet around with different people looking for them, particularly the government. I mean, was this always along the way considered the way that you wanted to illuminate the narrative and the issues? This chase around the country.
The journey is a big part of, I think, so many genres of great writing. It's the hero's journey, right? And there's also like the Bonnie and Clyde love story, which involves a journey. So that was always going to be a part of it, but it allowed us a backdrop to be able to speak to the impact of these issues on all these different communities and to show that it impacts all of us. Not just the racial divisions in our country, but also the class divisions in our country and the division between rural and urban.
Yeah, I
wanted to show that this was a whole country, problem, not just in a blue state or a city or anything like that. So yeah, I thought it was good that they went on this essential tour, through the whole nation.
Yeah, among their stops is a family farm, but also among we're introduced to the teacher Hannah Bloom in the midst of teaching and in her classroom, and of course in the midst of some of the bureaucratic issues, the teachers face trying to do their job. So you really mix in a wide variety of issues and influences into the story. Yeah, because Hannah is also the symbol of healthcare in this country, and you mentioned that a little bit. Can you talk about that a little bit more?
Yeah, sure. I mean, that got the whole thing going when she's just simply having a difficult time getting the correct medication. And again, something that's still an issue now is the costs of these medications are astronomical because of the control, the monopoly, and that simply the fact that she had to take the wrong medication or the one that wasn't quite right for her just because it was the one that she could afford when she knew there was a better solution out there. I mean, if that's not a metaphor for the whole book, not being able to get the better solution because hasn't been made available to you. That just started the whole thing going, and her frustration level. I mean, you see that in that opening chapter. So even if you think what happens with the whole inciting incident is a little bit over the top, it's like you understand the problem there. So it's really just sort of just opening that up a little bit. Like, okay, what's going to go on when people are choosing between their own life and death because they can't get the right medicine?
I think ultimately on every level, and with Hannah's story in particular as well, is this idea that in our country we treat citizens like consumers. And that's a kind of at the nucleus of each and every one of the problems that our characters reckon with in the book.
All right. Well, look, one of the things I wanted to do is get you to talk a little bit about your publishing company. So for those who don't know, that you were actually a part of my new publishers panel at San Diego in the before times when we could all hang out at a giant Comic-Con and get to know who was doing what. So tell us a little bit about A Wave of the World. And it had one existence, and it seems to be in an expansion mode right now.
Yeah, well, exactly. I started this while I was even still in art school, just because I knew the comics I wanted to work on were going to be my own. I mean, this title, for example, like I wanted to make sure that I could put this out, unedited, changed. Nobody's going to try to spin it a different way or anything like that. So the idea was just mostly to do our own work first. And that was, at Adrenaline, American Terrorist. It slowly started growing. The anthologies started picking up a lot more creators, really enjoyed working with them and helping new creators get published or, veteran creators do their own thing. And that was a lot of fun. And so we started picking up new creator-owned projects, doing more anthologies, expanding our own line a little bit. So we still view ourselves as a boutique publisher. We don't want our line to get that big. We don't do comic series. We're books, so we're focusing on somewhere around 8 books a year. So that would be our expansion, getting into the national book market, hopefully getting into the libraries really fits the kind of things that we publish. We're not really so much like the comic book artist alley as we may be small, but we think that what we publish fits well with schools, younger audiences, more literary audiences, people who might not read comics, but would be interested in a graphic novel if it suited them.
And once we got national distribution, we realized that we also wanted to expand into YA and middle grade and to do more literary crossovers. It seemed like a no-brainer with my other career, you could say, in the literary world to marry those two pieces of our work.
Great. So there are going to be new titles. Obviously, American Terrorist is coming out. Is it this month?
Yeah, it came out on Tuesday.
Came out on Tuesday. Okay.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
we can expect to see more books, obviously, from Away Blue World in the future.
Yeah, you will.
Yeah.
I have no doubt about it. So look, we've got some questions coming in from the audience. I'm gonna jump to some of them, and then I'll probably jump in with another question or two as well. But let's see. We have right now from Lori Hegler, I believe her name is. And she's asking, are your characters at all based on any real people? Or I would even add, is there someone that maybe inspired you in the real world?
They definitely are like a certain archetype. I don't know that there's anybody too specific to base off of. No, we were just like an investigative journalist, and we looked into who was doing investigative journalism at the time. I was a teacher for public school, which is kind of what Hannah does. Wendy was a teacher on the university level. So a little bit of that was based off of our own experience. I don't know. We know some lawyers and some scientists. I don't know that we base them too much on it, but we certainly did some research and tried to develop the individuality of these characters.
Yeah, they weren't based on specific people that we know, but I really subscribe to this sort of Jungian idea that like each of the characters that an author writes is a piece of themselves. So I think it's definitely true that, we try to imbue these characters with some of our own sort of, emotions. And that's how you dip into that kind of verisimilitude that gives you a feeling that these people are real and that they're true, right? You have to like reach for a certain universal truth, and you find that within yourself.
Well, we've got some questions. So you answered it, but there are some questions here about why'd you pick a teacher and what was about that. But you had a chance to answer that. Let's see. Well, of course, this is maybe the most obvious question. What's it like collaborating as a married couple? How'd the editing go on that end? Yeah.
Well, we already mentioned the jokes. There's some things that
he's really upset I took out those jokes.
You can still find the black and white edition if you want to. The color edition is much better. Good editing is. I think we both have to sort of accept. We are our own publishing company, and that means that we're unfiltered in some sense. But you definitely want to get feedback, and editing is important. And so the fact that we're able to bounce things off of each other and really test what works or doesn't, that's good.
I think that's something that's always been a part of both our creative relationship and also our personal relationship, is that, we have the ability, I think, to be very honest with each other while still holding on to a mutual respect, and to not pull punches, but to do it in a way that the other person can hear. So there's a lot of trust that's built through that process. And, it was interesting. This was our first collaboration, and we were writing it to a large degree when I was pregnant with our first child, and in that first year after she was born. And I think it was actually really great for our marriage, interestingly, because it gave us this space, this creative space that was outside of the domestic drudgery of having a new baby. So, for me, it's a romantic process in some ways.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, it was.
Well, that's it. Well, that's an interesting response, because I was about to ask you a question. Let's see. Rebecca Mensinga wants to know: did you have a sort of favorite part of the book that is there something that really stands out that you both enjoyed particularly working on?
I love the love story.
Yes. Well, yes.
That was pretty great to be able to write that between Hannah and Owen.
I also really love that speech at the end.
Oh, yeah.
Because that sort of speechifying is, that's kind of my thing.
Well, the book has a very powerful ending. I'm not even going to get into that, but it's a very powerful ending. So let's see. What was can you talk a little bit about the process of assembling the team? I mean, you told me about how you found Andy McDonald, and did he help you find the colorist? Can you tell us anything more on that end?
Well, let's see. Yeah, besides, I mean, I told the story with Andy, and that was great. I can't remember. I'm feeling like he must have recommended Matt Wilson. I can't remember how I asked Matt. I didn't know him before then. You know, obviously he was great. I remember he sent me some test pages, which sounds funny now because we could just look at all the work that he's done in the last 10 years. But then I was looking at his test pages and seeing his work over Matt, and that looked great. And then Michael was recommended to me when Matt couldn't do it. I asked Rico Renzi, and who's a really good colorist now too. And again, very busy because I only ask good colorists. And he recommended Michael, and Michael was a great fit with Matt. So yeah, it was again just checking out their work, seeing how it looked over Andy's work, making sure it was a good fit. And it was interesting because we had two colors, so we had to make sure that the colors could match. You know, so Michael had to do a little bit to his style to make sure it matched with what Matt Wilson had done so far.
Yeah, we were just super lucky.
Yeah. Yeah, and we did publish the book originally in black and white for that reason, because I was like, oh, I don't know how well the coloring is going to work. So we just went ahead and put it out. And then as it turned out, we found Michael and the coloring got done fairly early. So we've been waiting to put the colors out in print, and we finally got to do that. So.
Well, there are a number of questions here about how the media, the media in general, and because the media figures prominently in the book, there are questions about how do you see the media in this kind of polarized political environment that your book in some ways sort of anticipates, since it was really conceived a little while ago, and then we find ourselves in the midst of it. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, when we conceived of the book, it was in a post 9/11 world, and I was finishing up my PhD at Cambridge University in sociology, and my area of specialization is discourse analysis. And so I was really interested, we were both really interested in this period of time coinciding with the rise of the internet and how social media played into changes in political activism. When we started writing the book, it was at the it was at the end of George W. Bush's administration. Occupy Wall Street happened. And so, you know, that seemed like a very important backdrop to begin with.
Yeah, in terms of the media, I mean, part of the commentary was, I mean, we've gotten to the point where they're selling a product, right? I mean, they're selling you which side you want. And I think that's a basic tenet of marketing, that you create a competition, you know, Ford versus Chevy, Coke versus Pepsi, whatever. So, I mean, they're just out there selling to people their side, and the more that they can make a divide between that side and the other side, the more that people will pay to be, you know, to brand themselves on whichever side they chose. And so there's a little bit about that in the book. You know, how can we take away this sort of corporate owned media that's really just selling a product that people want to buy, because the truth isn't getting out there, not in a clean, unfiltered way.
Something that happened for the first time post 9/11 also was that in the Iraq War, you saw journalists become embedded with the military. And for the very first time, they lacked immunity. Before that time, there was this kind of international agreement that journalists were to be protected. But that was the first time when that wasn't happening anymore. And I think the impact on journalists and on what they can and cannot say has been huge and devastating.
Yeah, I mean, and a key part of the book, actually, in some ways, is the dilemma that journalists face. That I think Owen faces it at a certain point in the book, of writing an account that, in fact, may end up hurting maybe a community that he's a part of. If you tell the truth, there may be fallout where you don't expect it to happen. Mm-hmm. He's kind of been victimized by his own writing in other areas, as I understand.
Right. Yeah, the consequence from saying something that people don't want you to say, and that's not, you know, the corporations. If the people don't want to hear it, you know, I think we see that today, where they get mad at the messenger. Like, here's the truth. No, you know, that's not the truth, or, you know, you're the fake news or whatever for saying something, just because it's real. So yeah, he absolutely feels the consequence of that, and that, you know, informs his decisions going forward.
Well, you know, what I'd love to ask you, and you've talked a little bit about it, Tyler, that you went to the Kubert School, which is kind of a legendary comic school, you know, among comics professionals. Can you tell us a little bit more? I think we're getting questions about, you know, what inspired you both as both comics creators and as comics fans. Can you tell us a little bit about, you know, what were some of the things that, you know, made you want to enter this field?
So I grew up reading comics since I was like 4 years old. You know, mostly superhero comics. So I did get a little bit in the independent stuff with ElfQuest and some things on that nature. I didn't go into it right away. I think maybe when I was in high school in the 90s, I don't want to totally blame that, but they weren't as good then. So I moved away from that. I just also wasn't sure how to exactly go about it. So in college, I went into teaching, taught public school here in the US, and then abroad. I was in Tanzania and then Costa Rica. And that's where I applied to the Kubert School. I just simply made the decision that I did want to get into comics. I thought the school was a great gateway because it was comic specific. You know, I wasn't an artist for the sake of an artist. I wanted to tell these stories. You know, I was a storyteller, and comics, graphic novels were my chosen medium. So that led me to the Kubert School, which is a great way to just learn the entire ins and outs of how a comic is made, because they're not just having you draw, though there's a lot of that, but they'll teach you all about, you know, how the lettering is done, how the production is done, the printing, just being a professional. So it was really great. I made the most of those 3 years. I had Adam and Andy, and then Joe. I was lucky enough to have Joe as a teacher, and that was terrific. And yeah, like I formed the company like while I was still there, inspired, you know, in Joe and being such an original person himself who really forged his own path out there. I'm sure it wouldn't have happened if I hadn't also met Wendy my first year at the school, because that really, you know, it's all that, having her support and just being very positive. Anytime I would talk about like, oh, do I want to try to work at this company or do I want to kind of do my own thing? You know, she certainly was very open to helping me form a way for the world and to go in that direction. So,
well, you know, something, my parents have a little art supply store in Brooklyn, after which I was named. It's called WC Art Supply Company. And, you know, I was named Wendy Chin after the store. So, you know, it's a store that my parents own and run together. They founded it in 1972, and it's still running today. So for me, having a family business and being a part of a small family business is in my blood. It's very normal for me. So Tyler's desire to be an entrepreneur was very desirable, and not something that I pushed back against. And also, I'm very interested in all forms of storytelling. You know, as a poet and a novelist and an essayist. You know, graphic novels are very, very interesting to me. I was introduced to comics by my dad, who was a big comics reader when I was a kid, and kind of stopped reading them for a lot of years when I was in high school and college. And then Tyler reintroduced me to them. And I was really blown away by what they were able to do, graphic novels in particular, that they were able to tell interesting stories about the real world, that it wasn't just sci-fi or superheroes.
Well, this is great. Look, it looks like we're winding down here. I do want to ask you one question, because I saw on the book a blurb from George Gustine at the New York Times. So I thought that was a pretty interesting blurb to get on the book. Can you tell us a little bit about George and the book?
Yeah, well, that's a hilarious story because it really got this book going. So the original edition of this was 100 copies. That's all I put out to print, and brought it to New York Comic Con, and pretty much sold out that weekend. And George was one of the people that picked up a copy at New York Comic Con. And so here I am, done with that run basically, and just kind of wondering what to do with it in the future. And the book shows up in the New York Times. No idea that it was coming. Like I was wondering if I would get reviewed by the smallest local comic site, right? And here it is in the New York Times. which we were not prepared for. And I didn't have any copies left. And I have like librarians emailing me asking for copies, and it's not on Amazon and it's nowhere really. And so it was, I mean, it was a good problem to have. I was very excited about it. And it established a relationship with George, who we had write a foreword for this edition.
For the new edition.
Yeah. So it's great to have him involved. And so it just goes to show you never know what's going to happen when you put work out there. Yeah. I mean, you obviously have to work hard to get reviews and send it out there, but I was not even expecting that. And boom. Can you imagine? I mean, I don't even remember.
Well, George is kind of a pioneering as far as journalism for writing about comics at the New York Times. So you couldn't ask for a better person to blurb.
Yeah, to have him in our corner and to have his support is amazing. And he's a great guy.
Yeah.
So, I've got a question here about a sequel. I know you just published this, but people are impatient here. When's the next one coming? Come on. So, is this a standalone, or is there a possibility for?
Absolutely. No. I mean, we'll keep these themes going in our works in different ways, but I mean, if anyone has read that, I think you would agree that it's better left, as it ends. And we're happy with that. We're content with that. It's a big book, 220 pages. It should be satisfying on its own, and I think it really just begs the question, especially since it continues to be relevant. Where do we go as a civilization or society? That's a better word, from here. Not where should the characters go, because their story is told.
We're doing more collaborations, though.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think that's a perfect spot for us to wind this down. Thanks so much to Tyler and Wendy Chintana, the authors of American Terrorists, with art by Andy McDonald. This has been a great conversation. Very quickly, I'm going to wind this down. The next Books on Tap Live event is going to be next Wednesday, November 18th, with best-selling children's book author and illustrator Megan Hess, who'll be discussing her new picture book, Clarice, Holiday Heist. And you can sign up to receive a reminder of the event at publishersweekly.com/Books on Tap Live. Hope you can join us then. Thanks so much to Tyler and Wendy, and go out and get yourself a copy of American Terrorists.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having us on the show. We look forward to sending out to the winners, though. So good luck to everybody, and we'll sign your copy for you.
All right. This has been fun. Good to see you guys again.
Great to see you.
Thank you so much.
More to come, as I would say, on another program I'm on.
For sure. Yeah.